Thank you for showing up for another episode of Intuition, Your First Sense. This is Vicky and Leah in the background meowing. And this is working from home and the excitement of pandemic recording. This episode was actually an interview I did with my daughter as part of the, who is Vicky anyway? I thought it would be fun to have her on because she's the person who knows me the best in this lifetime. And she's also incredibly well-spoken, I believe, and able to bring some insight to what it's like being an empath and being an adult in this world, but also what it was like being a teenager and being empathic. So I'm hoping that this will bring some help, some information, and some guidance, and maybe a few laughs. Listen in. So joining me today is a very special guest. I would like you to meet my daughter, Kaela Baird. She is her own person, but I didn't know how else to describe her other than to claim my daughter. So thank you for doing this. Welcome to Intuition, Your First Sense. Welcome to my living room, which you've been to many times.
Thank you for having me.
So one of the reasons that I asked Kaela to join us is because she has the rare experience of being one of three, but one that's talking to me, who
behave.
who could give a little bit of background about what it was like growing up with me as her mother, to which she has no other real comparison. So I've kind of got this nailed. But also I wanted to, because she's often someone I go to when I have questions about, am I seeing this wrong? Or do you feel I'm out of line here, with our personal stuff. But I've also tossed to you a couple times, I can't see my way through this. Can you look at this? So I'm given the fact that you are a self-supporting adult in the world, I thought, ooh, wait a minute. I have somebody at in my world and that I have access to that I can ask the questions of that other people are asking me. And then we could also mix it in with, people are asking a lot about my process and what's it like. And I don't know about you, but I kind of find it boring. So I'm like, I'm going to have to go to other people because I'm not so sure this is. So opening up the door though, first I have a question that I think I've always presumed, but never asked you is, do you see yourself as intuitive?
Yes. I don't know if I would really use that word. I don't know what word I would use. I can't say I've put too much thought into it in regards to what word I would use. It's never really been that important to me to put a label on it. I know that I feel certain things and I feel certain things stronger than others. But I don't know exactly how to describe what I feel. So I just like to say that I'm spiritual, if that makes sense. I do feel like that gut feeling is your intuition. But I don't know if I personally would say that I'm like intuitive and I would label myself as intuitive in the same way that people like label you as intuitive. I wouldn't like say I was, if that makes sense.
Mine's kind of become a shingle, it's on the it's out there because I refuse to use the word psychic, because someone who is, everyone's intuitive, but the different levels of intuition that they have, a lot of the times you're right. I hear what you're saying, that it becomes an adjective and almost a verb too.
Yeah.
That I then am an intuitive rather than I am intuitive.
Right. So I feel like I do feel certain things strongly. Strong? Is that a word?
Yeah, it is.
It didn't sound right when I
You
said
do
it.
this all the time, people.
Um, but I wouldn't necessarily like label myself as that. I don't really like to like label myself as certain things in any aspect of my life. So I don't know,
Okay.
to be honest.
So you acknowledge intuitive pings and
Yeah.
intuitive hits and the the experience of intuition,
Yes.
but you don't need the label.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, that's such a young adult in our world right now.
No, like I am who I am and I feel what I feel, but I don't need to like specifically hone in on it. I just
And do you feel like some of that is because of the household you grew up in where we didn't make it a big deal?
part of it, and I love that. Thank you for that. It took
You're
so
welcome.
much stress off of growing up, I have to say. Um, but I also think that a part of it is just it's who I am. I just don't care. I'm just kind of blasé when it comes to that stuff. I am who I am. I just
Well, and that's been, I have to say, in being in the experience of raising you, that has been the gift that I've received too, is that it wasn't a big deal, but it also, I think the nonchalance, not no no nonchalance, just the way that we went about, you are who you are,
mhm.
for everybody in the house.
Yes.
And I think, I don't know that that was conscious on my part. I think it was just how I see people as
Yeah.
you are who you are. Um,
That was just the way well, at least the way that I saw it growing up. That was how I think our whole I can't speak for the boys, but just how our whole household seemed to be just like people were just people. It didn't really matter like who you were, where you came from, who you liked. As long as you were a good person, at your core, who cares? And that's who I try to be. So,
yeah,
I don't try to focus on that stuff.
yeah, I
So
appreciate
when you ask, I really have to think about it. I'm like, I
that.
wonder. Am I? I don't know. Who am I at the end of the day?
And it, which is,
I am.
it
I
is
don't know.
a question that keeps me in business when people say, I don't know who I am. I'm like, yes, you do.
Of course you do.
Let me help you, because maybe people didn't have the experience where, at least I feel like I respected who you were, but didn't tell you who you were.
Right. I agree. I feel that too.
Yeah. So but I wonder sometimes, was that difficult or a gift? Because you had to navigate it without me saying exactly, well, no, this is who you are. Um,
Right.
so, which also, I think at times, I trusted my own gut on that. Talk about intuition, because
Mhm.
nobody knows how to parent. Anybody
Right.
who thinks they do is making up hooey.
Mhm.
So the acknowledgement of the intuition, because people have asked me and they'll say, well, you must have had the most fascinating house. And I'm like, I don't know about that. Like, we read books, we watched movies, we,
It's a normal house.
yeah. I mean, a ghost or two, sure, but that's no big deal. Uh, um, so the empathic part of you, which I know well,
Mhm.
but is that something that's important to you to have that? Um,
Yes. That is definitely something that I struggled with a lot when I was younger, definitely in my teenage years. Um, and I think that's where I became the most grateful that you didn't force anything down my throat, especially because I feel like your adolescence is along with your young adult years when you're discovering a lot of who you are. Um, because high school is very intense. It's very intense, especially if you're empathic, because at least for me, I felt like I took on the energy of everybody who was around me. And I struggled a lot with my own mental health issues, depression and anxiety, just what was going on chemically with my own head. But also, you know, a lot of people go on with the similar experiences from puberty and, you know, the changes that go on in your life. So I took on all of that from everybody else on top of my stuff. It's exhausting physically and mentally and emotionally. And I feel like that was a large part in why I left high school. For nobody who knows, I dropped out of high school and just went straight to college and got my GED. It was a better decision for me, both education wise and just mentally, because it can be too much for some people. And I feel like being empathic has its pros and its cons. I feel like now that I'm a lot older, it helps me do great in my job now that I work in healthcare, especially with my experience with dad being sick. It made it so much easier to relate to people and be able to take my job more seriously and love my job. But as a child, it was so much harder just because I didn't know how to let stuff go when I was done with it and not know how to block that. I took everything on. Yeah. So as I've grown, I've learned how to process it better. But it can be really hard sometimes and I hate it. I wish I wasn't so open to that. And I don't know how to not be open to that sometimes, but I wouldn't not want to be empathic. Like I'd rather be who I am and how I am as opposed to not.
Right. Yeah. And that there's a difficulty, I think, sometimes for people in understanding exactly what is the difference between empathic and an empath.
Right.
Because empathic, well, we hope the whole human race has it, but some don't. And that simply means being able to understand what someone's going through, not sympathize, because when you sympathize, you're in the pity party.
Yeah, there's a big difference.
There is a big difference.
I feel like I explain that a lot. There's a big difference between sympathy and empathy. I cannot sympathize with some things, but still empathize with some things.
Right. Yeah.
I'm sorry, I interrupted you. What were you saying?
That's okay. That's okay. Family dynamic. So in the empath world, we were talking about this earlier, and I asked you to wait for the recording because what you asked. Can you ask the question? Did you write it down?
I did. Can I mention the Facebook part as well, or just the question? So on Facebook, at least in my demographic, I see a lot of statuses saying that they can't handle whatever's going on in the world because they're too empathetic or empathic. And I had asked you if there are truly so many empaths in the world, because I feel like I see that constantly. Like there's tons and tons and tons of statuses that say that. And I wanted to know what the difference is between being an empath versus having empathy. I mean, because are there truly that many empaths, or are people just taking on other people's crap for the sake of taking on other people's, stuff?
Yeah.
Instead of focusing on their own stuff.
I think it's a combination of both. Starting in the late 80s, about 89, 90, so just before you came in, there was this big flood of souls who have incredible ability to feel what other people are going through. So I do believe that there is a large number of empaths in the world. However, I do not and have never believed it to be an excuse for poor behavior,
Right.
or for drama, or for pointing fingers. There are so many people, like I'll see similar posts and someone will say how they're an empath. And I'm like, okay, but in that last post, you just totally ripped a person apart. How
Right.
can you say you're a true empath if you then go out to slay another person? Because an empath knows what it feels like
Right.
to experience that. And you just took your sorry self out there to do that? No,
Right.
I don't think so. So you're a empath. You're a fake empath. So I feel like, just like in every experience, there are some posers.
Mm-hmm.
There are some that believe that if they say they're an empath and they're truly absorbing all of this information and energy and all the stuff that flies around, that it gives them permission to be a bitch.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just not so. And it's, it's like when you were younger and you would do the voice of someone else when they were saying something. And I'd be like, wait a minute, read that without inflection. And you'd be like, oh, they just didn't want to come over now. Thank you. Yes, thank you. What some of the people who are posting with it, I just can't take it. You could practically put Velcro on the back of their hands and their forehead and see it like this, because they're like, I just can't take it. I'm an empath. And
Yeah.
we have some in our, our genetic circle, who dance with this. And it's not serving anyone to be of that drama, because drama has a low frequency energy. So yes, we are thankfully inundated with those in your age group who are extremely empathic. I don't know that they've been taught, and that was one of the reasons I wanted to do this show, or do this episode with your help, was because I can talk about it, but I'm not there.
Right.
And it makes it a little difficult, because when I was in that age group, I was just discovering what energy and what was going on, because, Nana smacked me on the head as she left and said, go ahead and be that sensitive thing you do. So I think genuine empaths are the ones who are, usually feel it, and then there's some kind of mission behind it. Like, let me tell you about this. You people need to know about this. Or what are we going to do about this? We got to change this. So if someone is an empath and they're feeling like they can't handle the world, well, then yes, you do need to look at where is your where are you not charging your battery? Are you not taking time for yourself in quiet without electronics? Are you forgetting to put white light on? Which I'm always saying to you, like, did you remember your white light? You work in a hospital. You put your deodorant on, put your white light on at the same time. So there are things that can be done. And also, I think as someone who walks around as an empath, I've had to learn to honor the other person's process so much, to really honor their soul's process, that I don't take it on. And, you've helped me with that a lot of the times when I've asked about, your brothers and stuff, am I doing things right? And you're like, you got to back up and you got to look at it a different way. And I'm like, shoot, she's right. So I think the best service an empath can be to themselves and to others is when it feels overwhelming, to back up, to absolutely go within, and whatever the stress relief method is. But then also ask, am I serving in any way? Can this be of help? Like for in your case, when you have a patient come through and you might empathically feel that this isn't all medical.
Yeah.
This is emotional.
Mm-hmm.
You can't say anything legally, like you can't do anything, but you can shift your energy and you can be kind,
Yeah.
and you can go about it that way. That's a way of being of service. It's not a matter of we all have to take the stage.
Yeah.
I think a lot of the times when you see those posts, I know I ask myself, what are they trying to fall on the sword here?
Right.
Whoop-de-doop-de-doo, you're an empath. So
Right.
is 90% of the population, the other 10 are sociopaths. So you have path in both.
Right. Or a psychopath. You can have
Psychopath. No wonder we're always walking our path. Are you a psychopath? Are you a sociopath? Are you an empath? What's your path?
Which path will you take?
There's a choice in your path. But it's so true. I'm glad you brought up high school, because that was one of the things that I was going to bring up, that the school is very different for people right now.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm actually seeing those who are super empathic, a couple of which we know, who are thriving because they're not in the in-person classroom.
Mm-hmm.
And, in your case, it was a matter of, I just felt like you were going to go down, like we were going to lose you completely.
You were.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna lie. Now that it's like, geez, how old am I now? Now that's 10 years later. I could completely be honest. You would have, if I stayed in that environment, just because it was just too much energy.
Yeah.
Not that it was just too much of my own stuff. It's just I didn't know at the time how to separate it all to make sense for myself, to like just take it off of myself so that I could just be done with it and like find my mission, if you will. And just, I don't know, just because it wasn't all mine.
No, it wasn't. And in true teenager fashion, you didn't want to listen to your mother.
No,
And I appreciate that. I think one of the funniest memories that's just coming to me now is remember when you were going through tapping, we were doing tapping and all that kind of thing.
EMDR.
Yeah, the EMDR and then the tapping and stuff. And I said to her, well, can you just do that? And you're like, I'm already under pressure. I can't be standing in public doing this. And that was like a turning point for me, where I was like, yeah, I guess so. All right. Because, my coping mechanism in growing up in the household I grew up in was everything just flew off me like water off a duck, or I wouldn't have survived there. So it's different how it works, and for each of us. So how do you do it now? Because the fact that you're an empath hasn't changed.
No.
But you're older with your own facilities.
Well, my awareness has changed a lot. Back then, I just, well, I'm not I'm still stubborn, just stubborn in different ways. But my awareness has changed. I'm more consciously aware that a lot of it isn't my own stuff. And when I'm taking on someone else's stuff, just to cut the cord, as you like to say, and just be like, take it back. I don't want it. Or if I'm choosing to take on someone's stuff because I want to bear the weight for them, that's a choice I'm willing to make. And if it's becoming heavy for myself, that's because I'm choosing to make it heavy for myself, as opposed to back then, I didn't know that there was one choice in the matter. For some people, there isn't, because they're just not aware. It's just stacking on top of each other. And now I can, put walls up. But back then, the only wall that I knew was blocking out like you. Because I did that all the time.
Tell people, do you mind telling people how you did that? Because I have shared that to a certain extent, because people will say, oh God, it must have been so hard being your kid.
I've gotten that question so many times. What was it like growing up with Vicky Baird as your daughter? She must have asked you so many questions. You must have never had any secrets. First of all, let me just make it one thing clear. I never had secrets because I didn't bother keeping them.
Right. Yeah, there was that. Yeah.
I'm not a secretive person. I will tell you whatever's on my mind, whether you like it or not. So
there. Yeah.
Let's just get that straight. But when it came to that aspect, though, it did kind of scare me a little bit. Not because I felt like I couldn't trust you or that you would ever violate that boundary, because I knew you wouldn't. You've always been my best friend all my life. I could tell you anything. But
anything, people.
Still can. But there was a time when I was becoming more depressed and anxious and just overwhelmed with everything, where I just didn't know what to share or how to. And I think part of it was because, going back to, I wasn't sure what was mine, and it didn't really feel, this wasn't like a conscious thought, but it didn't feel like I could share information that wasn't mine. And that makes so much more sense to me now as an adult, now that I'm looking back. But like, just to me back then, I just felt like I couldn't talk to my mom. And it wasn't that I couldn't, but just there was a teenager that couldn't talk to her mom. Yeah. But it was never anything that you had done. It was never that you were prying, because you would never done that. You would never do that. That's never the type of person that you are. But on that note, I just literally pictured a wall between us, a brick wall. And anytime that I just didn't want you seeing something, up went that wall, and it just didn't go through. And it is what it is. And
well, and the reason I bring it up is because I think it's brilliant. And, you know, even at the time, even if I felt like, woof, okay, not going in there, I've always thought that that was such a self-respecting thing, because your father did it too. Mm-hmm. Only he built walls all the way around him. But
you're not kidding.
I fully expect the lights to dim or something to happen at any point here. But I think that's such a wonderful thing and it speaks to your own soul's knowledge.
Right.
That you were like, hang on, I got to work around here. Because one of the things, like, people will come to me and they want me to tap into someone else. And I'm like, I'm not a psychic spy.
Right.
If it benefits the relationship between you and the person is putting it out there, I will look at it, no problem. Mm-hmm. But I think that sometimes very often people overstep the boundaries. And right. It's always been something to me, like, I don't want anybody poking in my stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's just rude.
Yeah.
So what would the adult you tell the teenager you in, I think, around the idea of being empathic? Because there's a lot of teenagers that listen to the show. And that was another reason I'm like, hang on, let me get someone closer to their age. And I'm going to have Kenzie on too. So she doesn't know it yet, but I am. Surprise! Way back when that I could have her on. That's my granddaughter, for those of you who are listening. When I slip into complete comfortability here, what would you say to your teen self about managing all of that? Like, point blank, what would you?
Well, I would probably start with take a breath.
Fantastic advice.
Take a deep breath. In through your nose and out through your mouth.
She listens to her.
Really deep. It reprograms the brain. I tell people that all the time. It resets the brain, gets you rethinking, and it's just necessary.
It is.
You'll pass out if you're not breathing. So start simple. And then also just, I think when I was working on processing my emotions, in addition to everybody else's, I don't know, I felt like I strived a lot more towards like anger, and it's hard not to like gravitate towards that when you start to feel like overwhelmed. At least for me, I don't know, I can't speak for anybody else, but I feel like when I get anxious or stressed out, I get angry.
Mm-hmm.
And so just like, I don't know, just take a step back. And I don't know, I'm not good at this. I'm not really good at like processing my own emotions all the time.
But what would you say to Kenzie if she said that? If she was going through that now, that she's just picking up everybody's stuff, what would you say to her?
I mean, don't.
Good.
I would be super blunt, Auntie Kaela, and just be like, don't. I mean, you got to put up that wall. It's not your stuff to take on.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a lot easier said than done, of course.
Yep.
But kind of like when I would block you out, sometimes it does take that mental reminder of, okay, I got to put my wall up. Okay, I got to brush my teeth. Okay, I got to set my alarms. Even if you got to put a sticky note on your mirror, put your wall up until you get into that like routine. And that was kind of where I was trying to go with the not being angry, is like resetting that that shift of your energy, of not like focusing on all the stuff that's weighing you down and making you angry. Like shift it to focus on things that are not so suffocating. Don't take on everybody else's stuff. Like focus on your own stuff and how you can, work through it so that it's not so overwhelming, if that makes any sense.
It makes perfect sense, because we are human and we have to be in the world.
Right.
And if I actually believe that if we take on other people's stuff, we're not respecting them to walk their own path.
Right.
And it doesn't have to wall you off. Just
right.
clear the wall of energy is, no, please don't send that stuff through.
Right. Like a screen.
Yeah.
Window screen. You can still let people in. You can still talk to them, but just keep your shit to yourself. Ooh, your stuff to yourself. I don't want it. Yeah. We can still share a little bit, but like keep your cooties to yourself, like a mask. Wear a mask.
There you go.
Protect yourself.
Please wear your energy mask.
Exactly.
And put one over your heart and your gut and stuff like that too, because it is about being respectful. And that's why it's so refreshing when you meet someone who maintains their own energy field. Like when they stay in their own energy field, it's like, you're so fun to be with, because there's no projecting of the junk. Mm-hmm. So I think that's brilliant. Do you have a funny memory of like being Vicky Baird's kid? Like more work related, I guess. Or
I have tons of stories from the store. I could go on all day about the store.
You used to run our store, yeah.
Oh Lord. I said Lord and gosh at the same time. It came out of Lord. I don't know. I mean, there's tons. Known you all my life. I don't know.
I kind of put you on the spot. One of my favorites was I think it was when I had my first office across the street. Mm-hmm. And I had met somebody in the laundromat, and I just wanted to help her out so bad, that little lady. And she kept calling the house. And when I walked in, you were like, your stalker with the walker will not.
Oh, I remember when you used to have appointments in the house. Oh my God. Can I be honest with you? I hated when you did that.
Yeah. That's why it didn't last long.
I hated that. Only because I was a teenager at the time. And it was awkward coming downstairs and there were strangers in the living room. And they'd always be like, "Hi, you're Vicky Barrett's daughter." And I'm like, "Hi, I'm just coming down for juice." Don't talk to me. No offense to anybody who might be a longtime client.
Yeah. Well, then
juice and go back to MySpace. I didn't want to talk.
That is why I moved it. Well, also because our house was so narrow or so long.
Right.
That you could see every room the minute you walked in. And I'm like, do the dishes, pick this up. I was like, oh, forget it. I can't do this. But the stalker with the walker, I think that was one of the one that comes up the most. I mean,
Dad came up with that, actually. I don't think I can take credit for that.
Oh, really? I thought you did.
Came up with that.
I thought you did because you didn't want to answer the phone anymore. You were like, she keeps calling, because I had told her I would give her a ride to the bank and stuff. So.
I do remember who it was. I don't remember her name, but I do know who you're talking
yeah,
about.
I don't remember her name. I just remember that.
I think Dad came up with that.
Okay.
It was one of us.
Good job. Well, that one always made me laugh, but it also helped me because I realized, whoa, there could be stalkers, and I've had a couple. But handled them well, I think. But what? Oh, I thought you had a funny. I mean, there is, as much as there's humor around this, there was always a reverence, and I always respected the fact that you guys respected what I did, because I knew it couldn't be easy. And sometimes even the grocery store was a little challenging just to get through, but
I think it was more challenging for you than it was for me. The only time I ever had a hard time was when I got to and it makes me laugh now looking back on it. But there was this one time I was working at the store and someone called in to make an appointment with you, and you were really busy around this time. It was summertime, always around my birthday. You got super busy. Yeah. And we had scheduled my birthday for the week prior because you were going to be busy on my birthday. So this lady, random, wanted to schedule an appointment, on the day that we were going to have my party. And I said, "Oh, I'm sorry, she's not scheduling for that day." "How dare she?" And she lost her mind at me. And I wanted to be like, yes, God forbid she gives birth and has a baby and needs to celebrate that baby. God forbid she has a child. I wanted to lose my mind. But I was like, yes, I'm sorry, she's busy that day. Sometimes I just want to be like, she is a normal human being, with a family and a husband and children and a normal life. She's allowed to do normal human things. Chill. But professionalism, Kaela.
Yeah, well.
It's my birthday. But chill. But it always makes me laugh looking back on that, because I was like, "Ooh, Miss Reba." She's my mother. Yes, I'll schedule your appointment. Sure. But yeah, some of those moments tested me a little bit, just to be like, yeah, sure.
Well, that's why you're so good. That's why you're so good at your job now. You had to do it when the emotion was high.
Right.
and really rein that in.
Yeah.
And people always said how professional you were and how nice it was and everything to deal with that. But yeah. And I know it's not easy working for family, so I appreciated that. So let me ask you, it wasn't until I start editing these things that I realized how often I say "so." Start almost all my sentences with it. Why do you love Halloween so much?
I don't know. I just am driven to it. I love blood and guts and gore, and it gives me a chance to be somebody I'm not for a day, which is probably what drives me to it the most. Not that I want to be somebody that I'm not, because I started this video with "I am who I am." I don't want to be a hypocrite or anything, but I am happy with who I am, but it's also exciting to just be Beetlejuice for a day. But that's who I'm being for Halloween, by the way.
Oh, cool. Oh yeah, I didn't know this.
But I think
so I don't have to prepare for like my heart stopping because
no, I'm going really basic. We're not doing anything for Halloween because of COVID. We're just going to take the girls trick-or-treating. So I'm just going to be a really basic, spike my hair up, green, Beetlejuice. Okay. Not the major.
For those of you out there, Kaela is a very gifted makeup artist. And when she does the wounds on her face,
special effects,
and the special effects and stuff, thankfully, I usually get a text first that want to see what I did for Halloween, because it does seem like, part of her face is missing, and that can be a little traumatizing to the person who struggled through your birth. So I was curious because it's right around Halloween now, and you've always loved it. And I don't think it's because I met your father at a Halloween party, but
it's just a perk. I didn't know that for many years, and then like now it just kind of is something else that I'm like, I like. I'm like, oh hey, maybe that's why, but it's not. It's just I've always loved it, and I don't know. It's just
but there is that ability is why actors, I work with a lot of actors, and why it's so fun to work with them too, because I can ask them to call on a character, or I think it's important to have that aspect of us, but it's just something that I was curious about your own personality.
Yeah. I've always loved make-believe. That was one big thing that like Emmy is my best friend growing up. That we always did, even into our teen years. We played make-believe for years, and I think it's just something that led into my adult years. I just moved it into like makeup and stuff. I just became characters and just played and stuff like that, as opposed to just acting them out and pretend. It's just I like to act, but I didn't want to act because I didn't want to be in front of people. I like pictures and special effects and spooking people, but that's pretty much it. I'm not a people person.
Who works in healthcare. That works well. So how do you think we could help kids today? Do you have any idea? Because a lot of, we both know from your own experience that a lot of people, and especially young adults, teenagers and young adults, turn to, alternate substances and drugs and alcohol and stuff to turn down some of these intuitive abilities. Mm-hmm. Is there something that maybe those of us a little older are missing that could help, do you think?
What do you mean by missing?
Well, and it might not be a fair question to ask of you, given that you grew up in the house that said, your goes, my goes energy, there's more to this than just your emotion. And you were, I like to think, heard and seen, which I think is a lot of what's difficult for kids. But I guess I'm wondering.
We also had a different view of substance abuse too, whereas I feel like a lot of people nowadays don't.
Say more about that.
You didn't allow any drinking, any talk of pot. We couldn't even mention pot. Or it was like the walls would burst into flames. Like, you're a completely different person than the one I grew up with. Yes, you are.
I definitely am. I'm not a different person. I'm an evolved.
Well, no, not a different person, but I feel like you're a lot more open-minded about certain things now than you were back then.
Yes, because back then I was terrified because I had 3 of you that I just knew were much like their father and would have no skill sets in that. So yes, there was some of that. And I don't like the energy. I think some of that was very selfish in that, or self-centered in that. I don't like the energy of it. I still don't like
Which is understandable. And knowing a lot of the stuff that I know and won't discuss, I get where you're coming from.
Yeah.
But back then, didn't understand it. It just felt very black or white. Like, no, we're not going to discuss this. We're not going to talk about this. And the only exposure I had to any of that was DARE class, which is very black and white as it is. So, whereas nowadays, kids are exposed to it everywhere, early, very, very young, Kenzie's age, 12, 11, 10, which I feel sets them up to fail very young, because once they start feeling overwhelmed or whatever they feel, they turn to it a lot quicker. So I feel like I don't feel like it's necessarily your generation is missing something. I feel like it's more my generation is what's kind of, I don't want to say missing it, but it's just, we're quicker to jump to it. Mm-hmm. If, like, mm-hmm. I don't know. I feel like we're less, I'm struggling to find the word, but I keep wanting to say patient.
Well, do you think there's less life skills there with managing of, like,
managing is a good word to say. Like, there's coping skills. Yeah. We don't know how to do, I don't want to say don't know how to do anything. That sounds unfair, but we just don't know how to handle what we're taking on. So we just reach for the closest thing. And I can speak from full experience. But I don't necessarily feel like that's the parenting from your generation's fault. I feel like that's just a lackadaisical, I don't know if that's a good word to use, but lazy mindset on my generation's part. Because I feel like when I look at my generation and their parenting, I go, oh, why? Why would you not just take 2 seconds to, like, think that through a little bit longer instead of just come along? And sometimes I do that myself, so I can't, be a hypocrite and say, don't do that, because I do the same thing. But, like, I wouldn't really say that it's something that your generation has to change. I think,
well, no, just like, how can we be of more help, or even to the younger ones now? And I agree with you, because there have been many parents who have paid for their 26, 7, 8-year-olds to come to me. And what ends up happening is I end up being Mama Vicky, because their parents aren't giving them any boundaries, or aren't finding that middle road between, no, don't do it, and let me explain why you might not want to do it. And what are the coping skills? What do you need in order to help you manage those emotions? Do you need to understand it's also physiological?
Right.
You're not doing anything wrong, feeling overwhelmed.
Right.
But here's what you could do to disperse that overwhelmment.
Right. I think that's what's not most important, but is very important, is having those coping skills and being able to access them without feeling like you need to have other resources to get you through it. But also having a good support system. I feel like there's a lot of people out there that don't have that nowadays. And that's on multiple generations, not necessarily yours or mine or anywhere else out there. I don't know. I feel like I struggle with that in my own life, so I don't really have a concrete answer.
Well, I think you helped, and a concrete may not be fair to ask of, because you're also in it right now. But
and I don't have kids, so don't ask me to raise your children, because I'm not the one.
Yeah, you do a fantastic job. None of us know how to raise kids. That, like I said earlier, it's all a fallacy. And I think if we had more of us, if people felt more comfortable admitting that they don't know what they're doing, but they're going to give their best shot, then I think everybody would relax, and it would be more accepting, and people could be seen as individuals. So,
Right.
Well, thank you so much for being willing to pop on, give a little insight, a little behind the scenes, as well as some great advice and just help. I think the more people who speak of, yeah, it's not always great to have these empathic abilities, but it's great to have these empathic abilities.
Absolutely.
It can be both.
Yeah,
It
absolutely.
can be both. And I honestly think that expression, it's too peoply out there, was invented for empaths, because sometimes that's truly the case, that you just need some solitude and
Right.
a little bit of quiet.
Right. I think the only thing that I would ever, I love that I'm an empath, don't get me wrong. I think the only thing that I would ever shift is the I don't really like calling it an afterlife. I have to be honest. I'm not crazy about that term. I would want to shift that. I would want to turn that off a little bit, because that can be a little loud sometimes. I'm not crazy about that. And I don't know if that's empath or if that's a whole different like realm.
That's a whole different level, babe. We'll have you back for that show. So that, while it is likely your empathic skills that have you decipher the message, that is a being able to traverse through the astral realms. So that's more of a mediumship thing. And you're welcome. They have done stuff to show that it's genetic. But some of that comes with also knowing yourself so well that you place those boundaries with that realm too. Listen, I have not figured out how to turn it off completely, so I am of no help to you.
I can help you.
You just ask them politely to knock it off.
GTFO.
I got that. It took me a minute to realize what GTFO meant. But I will use that. That's a different realm. And we will follow up. We'll go there and talk about that too, because there's, as the cat knocks the microphone, there's so many different layers of being a soul in a human body that I feel like I heard a great expression the other day that we should all have young mentors. We should all have mentors younger than us. And I was like, I've always done that, but I never gave it a name. So I want to bring that about for people, because there's so much to be learned if we just listen. You know, it's not your trips around the sun that make you smart or evolved. It's how you're learning and connecting and stuff. Well, you know, I adore you, and I appreciate you for being on. And for those who met her in the store, you know, there's all these years later, this is going to be fun for them too, I think, because we do tend to keep our community, don't we? They just keep going with me. I appreciate that. So thank you.
Thank you for having me.
For being part of the show.
Well, that was a lot of fun. I hope you enjoyed it as well and got some information out of our silliness and the experience that we had in being in this lifetime together thus far. And I will have her back, and we'll talk about the mediumship and how to manage the energy and the experience, and sometimes the responsibility of having those who have crossed tapping on your head. There's some funny stories there as well. So thank you so much for listening, and I wish you all the best. Take care. See you in the next episode. Thank you for listening to Intuition, Your First Sense. As always, please like and subscribe to this podcast wherever you are listening to it. Leave a review and take a minute to share it with a friend. You can find me all across social media at Coach Vicki Baird, and you can book a virtual session with me from wherever you are in the world at vickibaird.com/booking. That's VICKIBAIRD.com/booking. Thank you again, and see you on the next episode.